Welcome back to this week's OIS podcast. This episode, 5 VC leaders share their secrets to success, how to get the crucial Series A funding, whether and when to go public, and what markets are most exciting to them right now in retina. Led by moderator Dr. Emmett Cunningham of Blackstone Life Sciences, listen in as experts from both industry and finance offer their insights.
For those of you whom I've not met, my name is Emmett Cunningham. I'm an ophthalmologist by history, retina and uveitis, but really have been investing full-time for the past 15 years. I was at a firm called Clowers Ventures, which was acquired by Blackstone, and now I'm a senior managing director of Blackstone Life Sciences. We do all forms of biotechnology, but unfortunately, I don't do as much ophthalmology as I used to or would like to do. So let's start closest to me. I'll have you introduce yourself, your name, where you are, and why you're interested in retina.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmett. And my name is Josh CHIWATA. I'm from Santen Ventures, which is a corporate VC arm of Santen Pharmaceutical. And as you all is aware of this, that as a pharma company, it is becoming more important, to focus on the real unmet medical needs. So in ophthalmology, I think obviously the retina is very important area where there is such huge unmet medical needs. So as a Santen, both the R&D and the BD side, we have been focusing on retina very much. Yeah.
That's great. So you go by Josh, is that correct?
Yes.
Or Josh? Yeah. Josh?
Josh. Yeah.
Josh.
Yes.
Thank you, Josh. And for those of you who aren't maybe in the business world or they are practicing retina doctors, many companies have a corporate venture arm, which they can get a foot in the door, so to speak, of the most exciting emerging companies. So next.
Hi, my name is Andrew Liu. I'm a vice president of corporate development at Kanghong Pharmaceutical, which is based in Chengdu, China. Prior to that, I was head of corporate development at Santen. And Kanghong has built a leading position in ocular therapy in China by focusing on retina. So retina is an important segment for us. And we continue to focus on innovation. In fact, we have an ongoing research collaboration with UMass Medical School, the Jean Hore Therapy Center, which is directed by Dr. Guangping Gao, who you may know is one of the leading experts in AAV. So if that collaboration goes well, we'll be coming to some of you to talk about the international partnership.
That's great. And as we get through these 40 minutes, I do want to hear what your company is looking to bring in. Jason, please.
Thanks, Emmett. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Menzo, the Chief Operating Officer for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. And we are exclusively focused on retina, and specifically dry AMD and inherited retinal diseases. And recently, about now 3 years ago, we actually launched a venture fund called the RD Fund. And so we're not only advancing preclinical treatments through grants and awards, but also investing in companies, usually earlier on the development cycle, to advance the programs that are close to clinic and then moving through the clinic. Because again, our mission is to get treatments into patients' hands, not just to fund research endlessly. So it's been a real joy to be with the organization for now 3 years.
And since some folks may not have heard of such a thing, a philanthropic organization with a venture arm, why do you have a venture arm?
So our mission being to get treatments all the way through for, and actually one of the people that could be credited with some of the early investments is Patricia Ziliak. I was just talking to her in the break. But, our objective is to get treatments all the way through, not just preclinical through IND, obviously, and then into patients' hands. And if we're only focusing on preclinical through grants and awards, and we're not having a seat at the table to advance things, and it's not just about the opportunity to advance things, but also having the potential for financial returns too by making good investments.
Good, great. Well, I like the model. I wasn't being critical, but it's not always often seen. Piras. Everybody knows Firas. He was on stage.
I think I've been up here. Thanks to you, Emmett. Firas Rahal, I'm a partner at Retina Vitreous Associates Medical Group in Los Angeles, a fairly large retina-only busy practice involved heavily in clinical trials. And I'm a partner in Excite Ventures, which is a early stage VC for solely in ophthalmology. And we invest in drugs, diagnostics, devices, but all in the ophthalmology space, not limited to retina. But to answer the question, what's my interest in retina? Emmett, sadly, it's my only interest.
Okay, well, we're going to flesh that out in a bit, Firas, so hold on to that. Fred?
So Fred Guerard, CEO of Guerard. Our lead compound is in wet AMD, so this is my interest in retina. In a previous life, I was running Alcon Pharma and Novartis Retina. Was involved into a number of retina projects, including the development of brolucizumab and the in-licensing of Luxturna from Spark for the rest of the world. So I have a deep interest in retina.
Yeah, and lots of relevant perspective. So my first question is, what's hot in retina? What if you're an investor or a small company or a big company, what are you looking for? If I mentioned this to one of you earlier, I know the answer for most of non-retina, which is precision, genetically defined, patient-specific therapies that have a much higher likelihood of succeeding and getting approval. But I don't know that I would necessarily say that for retina. But you tell me, Fred, let's start with you on your end. What is hot? What when you were looking and now when people are looking at you, what piques interest?
Yeah, so when we were on the road to raise money for Guerard, I think one of the key questions was around how will you differentiate yourself to the large amount of products being developed now, especially in wet AMD, but not only in wet AMD. In every segment in retina, there is quite a lot of research ongoing, which is great. And I think the mindset was that one of these compounds would win the whole market and all the others would lose. And I spent actually a lot of time explaining that retina should not be different to any other therapeutic area. I mean, I worked in previous life in other spaces like, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, cardiology or dermatology or respiratory disease, where a number of compounds actually coexist in a certain market segment. And they all have their little niche and little positioning. And the retina market being so big, you don't need to have 100% market share to have a very valuable product or a very valuable company. You need 5% of market share in wet AMD to have a $1 billion product. So that was the biggest pushback I was giving. And people were thinking, if gene therapies are successful, it means short-acting anti-VEGFs will never going to be used ever again. And we all know it's not true. They're all going to coexist and will be used for different patients. So
I want to follow up on one point, which is there are many big pharma companies for whom if you do not have composition of matter, they won't even talk to you. And it's anathema. Novartis is one of those, actually, as you know. And now you're at a company where you have no composition of matter. So who's right? Can you get big and impactful drugs without composition of matter? And if so, why is Novartis so rigid on that point?
So Guerard is right, Novartis is wrong, obviously. No, I don't think there is right or wrong. I think there is an element of sexiness you need to have for certain companies, for your compounds to be a priority. And these companies have choice. When you have 500 clinical trials at any given time and you prioritize and reprioritize all the compounds all the time, sexiness is one aspect that is important. But I think if you have even an old molecule in a differentiated enough delivery platform or providing benefits that, other drugs cannot provide, like duration, for instance, or, better efficacy or less variation in, retinal thickness fluctuation, for instance, composition of matter somewhat doesn't matter as long as you have some sort of other protection.
I had always assumed that it was because if you had a generic, which was pennies or dollars, and you put it into a sustained release and charged thousands, there was a bit of a red face effect, but maybe I'm mistaken. you don't have to respond to that.
Well, so it depends if the generic was used for the exact same indication in the exact same way. I think that would be hard to justify. But of course, if you use that for a completely different purpose, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and it's all about the value add. So Firas, is your investment firm looking for when you were out there?
So to echo a little bit what was said and give a little context, I do think one of the biggest driver for funding and raising money that we see and hear about all the time are the big markets, the wet AMD and diabetic retinopathies. And of course, those are fabulous markets with a lot of need. But what I end up usually seeing sometimes, unfortunately, is people with great ideas that might be a more niche area that, to your point, may only need to get 5 or 10% of a marketplace, like failed therapies, or more importantly now, a more durable therapy, not lining up to go head to head with anti-VEGF drugs, which is a really, really high bar. As you know, 90% plus success rate is hard to beat. But I sadly sometimes see when the companies are going after bigger money, say beyond what I can invest or our group can invest, they're often swayed towards these two marketplaces, even though they began with a much more unique and perhaps elegant science and concept that might have been enough, but they want the big fish with the big dollars, and that's what attracts them.
Are there therapeutic areas other than AMD, DME, vein occlusion that you think could have that kind of market potential?
I do. Not a market potential of the size of those three, but a substantial marketplace if it were a product that worked and were safe for patients. Things like uveitis, of course, Jason will speak to RP products, but even uveitis, which has come up, I can't tell you, dozens of times along the road since 2014 when I started getting involved in the financial end, where products look really great to me as a retina physician for potential uveitis indications, and thought of doing that was there and discussions were there. And then by the next raise, it had changed to diabetic retinopathy, which we know has an inflammatory component, and certainly anti-inflammatory type drugs might be useful there, but they're incredibly useful in uveitis. But it's a small market. But to answer, I think it is a big enough market that plenty of investors could make good return on a good uveitis product. You're a uveitis specialist.
Okay. So Jason, you more than perhaps anybody on the group, perhaps Fred in his old job, interested in gene therapy, which is precision and genetically defined. But you have patients, maybe 20 or 50 or 200, 500 patients. It's a very challenged business model in some ways. So what do you think the ultimate impact of gene therapy is going to have on retina? Is it going to change our world, or is it going to be limited to niche indications?
Well, from where we sit, we're definitely going to start in those that have the potential to change that person's world. And to your point, just a week ago, we announced the formation of actually the first new company to spin out of the RD fund called Opus Genetics. And the markets that we're pursuing are exactly the way you described. They're, in some cases, several hundred patients as a global prevalence. But the opportunity to have a successful clinical trial and to see a child who has LCA that ultimately was on a particular trajectory in terms of their quality of life have a complete transformation, which we anticipate. We saw, obviously, what has happened for individuals treated with Sparks Luxturna. It's a real unique mantle that we get to hold as the Foundation Fighting Blindness, because ultimately being backed with patient dollars, so the RD fund, ultimately everything we invest is donor dollars. So they're philanthropic donations to the Foundation Fighting Blindness that are then used for venture investments, and then the returns go back to advance more science and to further the mission. And so an investment made by the RD fund ultimately is backed by the dollars of patients and individuals affected more than anything else. So to answer your question, I think that probably in the near term, the greatest impact of gene therapy is going to be those really clear gene targets that have well-defined natural history, good animal models, and are sort of de-risked for clinical success. What happens after that? We have needs for the ability to have larger transcripts in different vectors that can actually transport larger genes. But for right now, there's enough opportunity for the 300 genes that are affecting IRDs to hopefully pick a couple of them off.
Well, I think the number from target identification in the lab to approval is average of about 16 years. That number has been around for a long time, and it really hasn't gotten shorter. It's about the same or slightly longer, but it's about half that for gene therapy. Mm-hmm. So, and it's much, much less expensive. So you can actually iterate and learn more. And I think what Clearside and REGENXBIO seeing with suprachoroidal delivery and Adverum with intravitreal and other companies as well. I do think we're going to be able to move to more prevalent conditions and really administer to the masses over time. And even beyond AAV vectors, I think we have no idea what's coming with gene silencing and insertion, and it's going to be very, very exciting. But I come back to that 8 to 16 year cycle time. It's very slow. Most of my career has been a VEGF career. There have been other things, but it's dominated. I think we're about to enter a geographic atrophy period, right? Where you'll have these Apellis, Iveric taking their compounds for, and then everybody will be talking about geographic atrophy for a decade, but it's a very slow cycle. So what are you looking to build out in your company in China? What do you have, and what do you want to add to it in China?
So I think the VEGF is still kind of a mainstay for the company, and I would like to see obviously innovation in AAV. That's great, but a better delivery of VEGF I think would be very much welcome, especially in China, where it is hard for patients to get to the hospital to get injections. So I think I look for three things in terms of extends the delivery. One is that preferably a device that doesn't go into the eye, and two, preferably a device that sort of pumps rather than just rely on elution, and then third, that it can deliver a drug directly from the bottle rather than reformulating it with the polymer or something like that. So I know Dr. Mark Mayan has a device that sort of I hope he's successful because it fits those three characteristics pretty well, and that would be something that would be very, very good for underserved markets like China.
So a follow-up question on sort of what flies in China. Many companies want to talk to Chinese companies about regional deals, and yet my impression has been that only those drugs that are the most impactful, life-saving, vision-saving, et cetera, can really command a price that even comes close. And even then, it doesn't really come close to a price in the US, for example.
Right.
So what can be licensed to China or a Chinese company, and what is really just very difficult?
Well, I mean, as of like yesterday counting, I'm aware of 12 different companies set up as to focus on ophthalmology, and to name a few, there's a company called Alphamat, and there's Ocumension. You might have heard of some of these names, and between the 12 companies, close to $2 billion has been raised, both in the initially from a seed funding from an investment fund, and then Ocumension and another company, they were able to raise $400 million more on the public market. So there's quite a lot of resources, and if you look at the kind of what has been licensed by some of these companies, I mean, UTIC is one, and so it's myopic, atropine. Yeah,
how big is the anti-VEGF market in China? What's the total sales for anti-VEGF agents in China?
I think it's close to maybe 700 million now.
700.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a tenth, less than a tenth of this country.
That's generally the rule. Is like it's about 1/10 of the U.S. but it's obviously the pricing is lower, but it is a rapidly aging society. So in terms of what's being administered, it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I remember learning that latanoprost was $1 billion here, sold about 100 million in China. So the 10th is a good number to remember. And what is Santen Ventures looking for? Well, first tell us whether you can do whatever you want or Santen tells you what to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. And
That means Santa tells him what to do.
Yeah, I don't have any, much comment which I like that, but I know, as a kind of, how can I say, how we see the market is very, similar to the comment from others. So in Retina, there are very roughly two target segment for us. One is, anti-VEGF, DME, or DR, these, diseases which has already, huge, existing market. While I know we are we are selling Eylea in Japan, but it's a, kind of a marketing partnership with Bayer. And in other countries, unfortunately, we something, haven't had any, anti-VEGF product. And so we have been doing something, for that market in ex-Japan market. But as we just discussed in the morning session, probably the anti-VEGF market would be a kind of a crowded one in next 5 years or 10 years. So we have to be realistic, what something can do from now for this market. Yeah, but still we are interested, and we are closely monitoring the, all the opportunities in the market. Yeah, if it includes Guerard, Cambacept, everything. And so we are happy to discuss any type of partnership for anti-VEGF. And also something has very interested in ILD diseases. And this is also being discussed, but challenge is the ILD composed of very small subset of the diseases. So each of them doesn't have much patient. So if something tends to do anything in this field, probably it make us difficult to survive in the pharmaceutical business. So there are many uncertainties for something. That is why we established a corporate VC, and by doing so, we can learn the dynamics and movement in the retina, so that by taking some risk, financial risk, and then hopefully we can secure the seeds for the new product or services for the future sentence business.
Okay, thank you for that. So let us turn now to maybe the earlier stage companies and company creation. Some of you have tried to create early stage companies. Some of you have funded early stage companies. If you were to give a word or two of advice to people who want to raise money at that stage, really company creation, Series A, what would be your advice? You want to start? You're nodding as if you have it, so let's share it with us.
The wheels are turning, sorry. I mean, for anyone who's in that position right now, I think that one of the most important things is just to be really sharp in either yourself or bring on a team of an experienced executive or someone who's done this before, but really being able to tell your story. And certainly from where we sit, it's not just about the technology. It's about the team, the operational plan, being able to see and really clearly understand the drivers of value, what the milestones are, the use of proceeds, and to make sure that as you're coming out of the gates and you're partnering with an investor, to make sure that you've got a really strong investor that's committed to the vision of the scientific founders. That's it, to make sure that you've got the real clear vision, not just great technology, but actually the roadmap on how to execute on it. That's such an important piece of the equation.
So I agree completely. It's all about a plan to get to real value creation and how much that's going to cost. And the difficulty is it's costing more and more every year. And especially if you go into a crowded space like the AMD space, it can cost 60 million until you know whether you're differentiated or more, maybe 100 million. And that puts people in a difficult position. Speaking of which, Fred, how do you go out and ask for $100 million before you have? I'm changing to Fred now because I know you have gone out to ask for hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you need to raise large amounts of money when you're going out?
Yeah, well, I think you need, as you said, a clear story, and a story of explaining why your drug would be used and how differentiated it will be at the end, as well as a roadmap. As you said, cutting a lot of early stage companies cut corners on things like CMC, for instance, and that inevitably comes back at you at some stage. And so I think being able to show that you've built something solid and that you not cut corners and that you can, explain what you're going to do next and when are the next inflection points. I think that's key to raise large amounts of money. I think the team, in some ways, the feeling I got being now on the side of the small company side, not the big one, is a lot of attention was dedicated to evaluating the team as much as evaluating the technology. And I think, sometimes wrongly believe people invest behind a product, where I got the feeling that people were actually investing more behind a team that can turn around situation when it will inevitably not go exactly according to plan. So those are the things I've kind of learned in that journey.
Firas, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say this, but I couldn't agree more with those comments. It's clearly in that early stage, from our recent experiences, even comparing portfolio companies that we even currently have, the choice of the early management team, particularly usually, to your point, one person, a CEO type, whatever you title that person, who's going to drive the development plan, drive the stakeholders to stay on point and stay on schedule, raise the right amount of money, not too little, let's say, just to get started, but enough to get to that next inflection point. And then, so as not to be too repetitive, and I think Jason mentioned this as well, maybe the most important thing that we viewed when we're waiting around to see if those next bigger investors are coming is how well that can be articulated by that individual. It's not really a team effort as much as it probably should be. And the founders may not always be that equipped at articulating the message in a way that, as you just said, to raise the 60 million, it's a challenge. Nobody wants to give you that kind of money. And as an early investor, we're sort of laying in the weeds, helping, talking to the new investors potentially. But one key person has to be able to deliver and articulate that excellent development plan with authority. And I think that's the critical thing.
It is. It can be challenging. We have this expression in investing that raising insufficient funds is a bridge to nowhere. And nobody wants to do that. So you really have to raise enough to get to that inflection point, plus 6 months to raise the next round. And in crowded spaces like AMD, that, as I say, can be $40 million. So it really takes amazing science, amazing animal results, an amazing team, because it's a big bet. It's a really, really large bet. And that's another reason you see many, many companies and people going after these rare indications, because it's a half or a third of the total cost to get to a pretty clear proof of concept. So there's that. Now, let's assume you have gotten to what is a clear de-risking, and you say, well, everybody's going public. There were, I think, 600 IPOs in the last 5 years, some phenomenal number, this crazy number of IPOs. In the last, I looked at this recently, in the last 10 or 12 years, the number of public biotech companies has increased 5-fold. It's just, there aren't enough management teams, great management teams for all these. There aren't enough analysts to cover them. It's really, and so you have this whole microcap universe that nobody's paying attention to. Investors aren't looking at it, analysts aren't looking, because there just aren't enough. It's growing faster than the ecosystem can grow. But that said, how do you think, you went through this, Fred, I'll go back to you, and then we'll have some other comments. How do you think about when and how to go public? And should it be with a SPAC? Should it be a reverse merger, an IPO? What are some thoughts that went through your mind when you were trying to decide?
Yeah, thank you for a very narrow question, Emmett. It's hard to tell. I think it depends on your situation. So SPACs are interesting, but I found them to be almost more complicated than IPOs. I think these days IPOs are actually probably easier than SPAC in some ways. And what I've seen now that we are looking to in-license earlier stage technologies is sometimes companies think they can go public without having a team in place. And they think the SPAC is the way to go public in that case, where they basically what they have is a product, but it's not a team. And I don't think you can necessarily do that and operationalize then a public company without a team. You need a CFO and you need a public company CEO. So I don't know if SPAC is the answer to every problem. IPO is, I mean, it's really depending on the segment where you are. So it seems if you're in oncology, you can IPO with one mouse. But if you're in wet AMD these days, I'm not quite sure. I think you probably need to have done at least a proof of concept in non-monkeys primates, you know. So so I think it depends a bit on which stage you are. But the IPO market has been incredibly good. I mean, we did the IPO during COVID, and that was logistically intense and very new because we did the whole IPO process on Zoom. But it did work extremely well, and we had a lot of interest. And so the market is clearly open for IPOs. But I think it's going too early is a huge risk, because when you need to pivot your technology, if your technology is not ready for prime time and ready for public market scrutiny, you're actually much better to be private. You can pivot, you can tweak, you can tune, you have the flexibility to do things you cannot do when you're public, because you have to explain along the way what you're doing and provide that clear roadmap I was talking about. So I would strongly advise anyone not to go public too early and have the right syndicate of investors before going public.
Yeah, I would just add to that, if you can, and it's not always possible, but you'd like to go public at a valuation that does not land you in microcap land. So if you can have a valuation above 500, it'll make your life tremendously more easy, because no one will cover you, no one will invest in you. If you're 100 million market cap, it's very, very challenging these days. Okay, let's turn to this end of the table and talk about partnerships, corporate partnerships, whether it's China or Japan or Europe. How, on the one hand, a small company would say, well, I have to give up so much economics to do that partnership, especially if I do it early, I should just wait until later. But on the other hand, it's really hard to sell stuff in Japan and China if you don't do those partnerships. So how should companies think about using those regional partnerships as funding vehicles? Another narrow question.
Well, definitely China, for example, the regulatory environment is rapidly evolving, and also the reimbursement is quite tricky, and I think many of the potential partners I speak to, they just feel like it's kind of an opaque market, and on top of that, you have the possibly rising political tension with the United States, and so therefore, leads to the sort of story how we like to position ourselves. It would be, just have a good local partners who can help you to navigate some of the potential pitfalls, and who really are on top of the very rapidly changing both payers and also regulatory environment.
So the arguments I hear around the board at board meetings against doing, especially a China deal, are it's all back-ended. The upfronts are modest, and so it really isn't much of a financing vehicle. And by the way, if you do that, and one of the companies that actually wants to have that market, like Novartis, will be less interested when they come to look at you for an acquisition. So true or false, or somewhere in the middle?
I haven't really seen a situation where it sort of detracts from interest, because we've seen companies that have successfully had European partnership and then commercial partnership, and then commercial partnership for Asia, and so they can just focus on the science. I think at least that's I seem to see that quite a bit.
And obviously, Japan has a great, or Santen has a great distribution network in Asia. Do they do deals just in Japan, or is it really pan-Asia when you partnership with Santen?
Yeah, given the situation that the other Asian countries were also the Europe is becoming more important for Santen as I don't like to make that much, pessimistic comment for Japanese market, but we have to be realistic that, presence of the Japan market in the total, global market, it's, becoming smaller. So to keep the, good, growth rate as a Santen, we have to be, invest more and more in the other countries. I mean, the other Asian countries, other, European countries. Also, we are trying to enter into the US. So from that standpoint, we basically, don't do the, Japan-specific license much at this time. But it of course, depend on the, what the type of partnership the, potential partner wants to discuss. Japan, specific licenses. Yeah, of course, it's still possible, but it will be, from Santen's perspective, we also have established commercial capability in Asia and Europe. So by having commercial right for those countries, that will be more effective from the investment efficiency standpoint. Yeah, but we are flexible. We made a couple of licensing deal for in these 2 years. Some of them are for Asia only. Some of them are Japan ex-US license. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, maybe to comment on my own question and just a perspective is that it's sometimes nice to have it back-ended if your partner is very capable and they're going to do a great job commercializing the drug, because that's where all the value is. And I do think many of the Asia deals can have a pretty hefty royalty and some success milestones as part of it. So from that perspective, it can be good. And when you were at Novartis, if someone had partnered China, did it really worry you or not?
Traditionally, large multinationals have not been the most successful in these two markets. So I think having a local partner does not destroy necessarily a lot of value. I think large companies sometimes look more at US and Europe. Disconnecting US from Europe is more of an issue for these big pharma. I think China and Japan are probably fair game, and this will be safe.
Okay, I didn't. In all candor, I do give some direction to what questions I'm going to ask, although there were many surprises here today. My friends will tell me when we're done. This is a complete surprise, and it's the last question. What area do you think is going to, which subpart of retina do you think is going to just capture our attention for the next 5 years? Which one subpart of retina? Jason's nodding again, so I'll let him jump in.
Yeah, I loved the session this afternoon on artificial intelligence. And I think that I was at a meeting last week where Michael Chang, the new director of NEI, gave a great presentation on artificial intelligence and machine learning. I thought the presentations today were great. There's a lot of activity in that space. I think that's going to be transformational.
Great. For us, yeah.
I'd have to say in that 5 or so time frame, the biggest thing, dry AMD is my guess.
Yeah. Fred?
Yeah, I would have said intermediate AMD and geographic atrophy, because there's such a huge number of patients with no options these days.
I think about 8 years ago, I had a slide at OIS that said dry is the new wet. And it's, but I was early. I was too early. Now I think it's about to come. And
well, I kind of have something I worry about is the lack of relative lack of ophthalmologists. I think per population, ophthalmologists, especially retina specialists in China, is very, very low. So that's why it's very, very well, undertreated. So I think somebody's going to focus on this in the next 5 to 10 years. You have a really rapidly aging society, and just no eye doctors to see when it's going to be a huge problem. And I hope that somebody's going to pay attention to that over the next 5 to 10 years.
So my wife and I were talking about it on the drive here from Austin just this morning. I think home monitoring is going to be big, just for that reason. Limited nurses, limited physicians, burgeoning patients. It's going to go remote faster than we thought, and AI will probably accelerate and augment all of that. You have the last word, Yosh.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really we are about to have first product for the GA. So in terms of the commercial retinal market, I think that will give a huge impact on it. Yeah, I'm sure. And if I have to make a different comment, this may be my personal hope, but I'd like to see a real game changer in the IRD field. And FFB and the other investors are making huge investment in gene and cell therapies. And now that a lot of clinical trials are ongoing. So I don't think we have seen the real game changer in this field. But hopefully we'd like to see something in the next maybe 5 years or 10 years. But that's my hope.
Excellent. Well, I thank the panelists. Great discussion. I'll invite up the next moderator. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the OIS podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our iTunes channel so you get the latest ophthalmology insights. Got a story of your own to tell? Apply to be a guest at OIS.net.